Ms. Menmar expressed concerns regarding how the district handles observation requests. While the FCPS policy does not discuss parental notice to be rendered 1 day in advance, the mode for how such notice is provided is not specified. The lack of specificity is logical for numerous circumstances, such as the ability to officially request a child observation event. However, the key observation Ms. Menmar brought forth was an added step not captured within the policy, an official special education form. Said document was originally presented by one of the principals in the district, noted as official method for requesting parental observation. While the form might meet the spirit and intent of the policy, Ms. Menmar does not believe that it is required and instead creates an undue barrier. Furthermore, Ms. Menmar assesses that if the district does intend to use the form as the sole method for officially requesting parental observations, it is incumbent on the superintendent to provide notice to the district via email, and a policy update should follow stipulating the requirement.
Is there a second to including this amendment in the minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Right?
Aye. And a vote on the minutes? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The minutes as amended are approved. There were a couple of typographical errors that have been corrected as well. I don't believe we have any public comment this evening, and that brings us to our presentation. I just want to thank our guests tonight for taking the time. We have the powerhouse of literacy in Fauquier County is all here, so yeah, hopefully nothing will happen to this building tonight because it's all in this room. So with that, Ms. Boring, we would ask that you introduce your colleagues and go to it.
Well, I'm Whitney Boring. I'm the Director of Instruction.
And if you can use the mic, we're live streamed, so we'll make it as hard as possible. I believe your presentation is going to be up on the screen.
I can take it off the stand? Well, all right, I'm Whitney Boring, Director of Instruction. Behind me I have Kathy Crane. She's our elementary language arts supervisor, as well as Sharon Baudy. She is our secondary language arts instructional supervisor. So they are here with us tonight in partnership with Angie Gum and the special education team as we present to you all on some updates that we have about the Virginia Literacy Act and where we're currently at within that process. Do you have it?
And I'm just going to say right now, I know this is going to be a big presentation, and there are a lot of questions that people had already sent to me, so I'm going to ask that unless you have a question for clarification, we go through the presentation, and then my intent is to ask the questions that people submitted before we go into any other questions, just so we have time to cover everything.
If you're having difficulty hearing.
Okay.
Is there a way to turn that off?
It was just really hot, so would you mind? Thank you.
A little bit better, yeah. I say, can do those windows open, Ms. Gum? You can just work. Try that.
So just so everybody understands how this works, we have the same presentation up on the screen in this room. It's also loaded on the online live stream, but it's actually two separate systems. So
We're having technical difficulties
We'll
with
get you up and running.
the on-site version.
but we'll find it. We have full faith in you.
Can we do it with your handout, because I don't have internet on that, and I don't want to take too much time.
Yeah, you're fine. I came prepared.
Awesome.
I do have it up for.
So everyone, okay,
So the
Great.
virtual folks can see it.
that's the most important thing.
All right. Well, I'm going to be using my paper, so I
And we'll
apologize.
send out copies, if it's okay with you, we'll send out
Yeah,
copies of
yeah,
the
that's
slides
fine.
to everybody.
All right, so this is an update on the Virginia Literacy Act. So currently this year, our elementary schools, all 11 elementary schools are experiencing our first year of implementation with Virginia Literacy Act. And next year, our K-8, it'll go K-8, so it'll also impact our middle schools. So in terms of our timelines and updates, so we have Our VLA requirements as of this school year, so 24-25, we have adopted VDOE's approved core curriculum and used it, and are currently using it with fidelity. Administering the new VALS screener in grades K through 3. Developing and implementing student reading plans for students who qualify for those grades K through 3. Adopt VDOE approved supplemental materials, and adopt VDOE approved intervention materials. So those were our big ticket items that we were asked to do as requirements that came with Virginia Literacy Act for this present school year. Looking ahead to the 25-26 school year, we have been asked to adopt VDOE approved core curriculum and use with fidelity for grades 6 through 8, which I'm happy to report that list has come out. The 6-8 textbook list from the VDOE, and what we currently use, HMH into literature, is on that list. So we are able to continue using that. Yes, sigh of relief. Administer VALS screener in grades 4 through 8. So the VALS screener will continue on throughout the upper grade levels as well. Develop and implement student reading plans, for students who qualify in grades K through 8. So we'll see our reading plans continue on through K-8 next school year. In addition to that, adopt VDOE approved supplemental materials and adopt VDOE approved intervention materials. So that is really our to-do list as we're planning ahead for next school year of things that we need to accomplish. One of those being the core curriculum piece that we already have, and we're on year 3 of implementation with that. So that is good news for us. My next slide was titled Student Reading Plans, so some updates there. Student reading plans are required for students in grades K through 3 who score in the high-risk band during administration of the fall, mid-year, and spring VALS screener. So for the 24-25 school year, student reading plans are required only for K-3 students due to the current pilot for VALS 4 through 8 and ongoing supplemental and intervention materials reviews. So currently what we know is not much in regards to the 4-8 grade levels. There's still a lot to learn in terms of what our requirements as a division are going to be from the state, because that is still in pilot mode across the Commonwealth. In regards to intervention materials, we have adopted Amplify Education M-Class intervention for our students in grades K-3. This is utilized by our reading specialists in reading centers across all 11 elementary schools. This is a targeted, systematic instruction that is delivered in small group settings with 10-day lesson plans designed off students' specific needs to help develop foundational literacy skills. It utilizes assessment data from Dibble's diagnostic measures to determine which skills the student knows and which skills need further development.
Is this Amplify part of the reading plans?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Intervention materials for Tier 3 supports is, again, adopted Amplify Education M-Class intervention for students in grades K-3. And then additionally, there is the offering of Linda Mood Bell Seeing Stars and Visualizing and Verbalizing for grades 2nd grade through 6th grade. In regards to our middle school implementation, which is
I apologize. What was the Tier 3 before Seeing Stars?
Amplify Education M-Class
Which is
intervention.
different than what's being offered by the reading specialists, correct?
It is the same program.
Okay, so
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the special education students
Correct.
would they be in the same small groups?
No, they are not in the same small groups. Am I speaking correctly to that?
When it comes to that, reading specialists legally can serve the students that are identified, so it would be in addition to their IEP time, but special education teachers are not allowed to see general ed students. So in some cases, depending upon the groups, depending upon the size of the groups, the level of the groups, the need of the students, in some cases, there may be some special education students that are receiving services through the reading centers.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So that was something
It does.
that was purchased by SPED that I'm sure Angie can speak to. But that was in addition to what they were using in planning.
Okay, I'll ask another question later on.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My last slide was on middle school implementation. Our curriculum that is in use is on the approved list, as I mentioned earlier, so that's HMH into literature, and we are in year 3 of that implementation for our division. In terms of VALS requirements, this is undetermined at this time, so we have gotten very little guidance from the state, and we're actively seeking that guidance, because it is currently still in pilot. So we're hopeful that we'll have more information on what that will look like and what that will require for our grades 4 through 8 by the end of this school year so that we can plan this summer for that. Student reading plans, again, this is going to be something that is currently undetermined because we have yet to be provided that guidance of what that's going to look like and what is going to qualify those students in those grade levels for a student reading plan. Supplemental materials is undetermined at this time because we are still waiting on that list, as well as the intervention materials list for grades 6 through 8. So we have not yet been able to see those approved lists and be able to utilize that information yet. Currently, VLA is only K-8. High schools have not yet been considered into that process. So really next year's focus will be taking what we've implemented this year in K-5 and really maximizing that into our K-8 learning environments. Okay?
Great.
What questions might you all have?
Um,
Now I'll let my...
We had a list of questions, and some of these are specific to special ed, but I want to start, since I want to reward the members of the committee who submit questions ahead of time. So I want to make sure that we address those questions. So let me get that list. And I know some of these Ms. Gum has already, they're obviously more special education questions. So the first is, what is the process for identifying students in general education who are struggling in reading? That's the VALS, correct?
Yep.
And
Do you want me to specify anything about the VALS? So in grades K through 2, all students take the VALS screener. In grade 3, it is where if a student is flagged moderate to high risk, that is when they would be required to take the VALS.
How does that differ from the PALS?
It has a V instead of a P.
Right, besides that.
Ms. Crane.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Kathy Crane. Nice to see you. Thanks for having us tonight. VALS is new to all of us this year. And there's still a lot of unknown, even though we're administering it right now, as you can imagine. So with PALS, it's the very same thing where it's given 3 times a year.
Okay.
3rd grade students were only assessed if they were new to Virginia, they attended summer learning, or if they had not met the benchmark the previous spring of their 2nd grade year. So we're still doing that same thing this year. We have K1 and 2 and 3rd graders who participated in summer learning over the summer, who are new to Virginia, or those who did not meet the benchmark last year. There is no benchmark now. There are risk bands, high risk band, moderate risk band, and low risk band for reading difficulties.
Okay,
So there is a significant change.
Yeah.
There is no benchmark.
Okay, no
There are risk
benchmark.
bands now.
Now, how are the bands determined? How are the bands determined?
By the people at the Virginia Literacy Partnership Office.
But is it based on a test score?
It's a psychometric score that they've determined the ranges, and that is available on the Virginia Literacy Partnership website. Also, families should have received that information at conferences or from their child's teacher to make sure that you see where the range is for the high risk, the moderate risk, and the low risk. When Region 4, my Region 4 colleagues met, we asked the Virginia Literacy Partnerships Office which subtests received a higher score or weighted, and we did not receive a clear answer. Yes, ma'am, we did not receive a clear answer for that. I will tell you that at mid-year, not all subtests are given, only the language-based ones. And the RAN was given, the rapid automatized naming was given to kindergarten students. And so then we'll administer it again in the spring. Because of the weather and because of sicknesses, we've had some spotty testing, like we're still trying to finish up some things. They've given us a longer window to make sure all the data's in so we can pull all of that together.
Do they have access to any other data other than the test scores? Like, are they looking at school demographics or anything else to determine? who's at risk?
I mean, we look at that. We look at division level scores. We've done that always.
But to determine which particular child is in a band.
They're looking across the Commonwealth at students. So just like right now, they're piloting the 4 through 8. Right now, there are 17 divisions within Virginia that are piloting 4 through 8 vowels. You don't really get any information about it if you are a piloting division. They come in, they assess certain students, and the divisions don't really get any feedback from that. And we won't know what that looks like in more than likely the summer because they're doing fall, mid-year, and spring. So then they're going to have to take all of that data and figure out what that's going to look like and what the specific subtest will look like.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, this is one more test, 3 more tests a year that kids from
So,
will take?
not for elementary because we gave PALS. That's our literacy screener.
Right.
But this will be another assessment. The determination as to who's going to get it in 4th grade
We don't know.
and 8th through 8th grade, we don't know whether it's going to be a cut score for SOLs. We don't know what that's going to look like, what's the determining factor for that. Our kids next year, it'll be based on their spring scores, whether or not they're in high risk, moderate, or moderate risk.
I do want to say, I do believe that there's a system from the VDOE that does highlight, like kids when they have like lower SOL scores within the core subjects. So I'm wondering if that might be something that kind of pings back to you guys.
It might be, and we've been participating in All in Virginia for the last few years where the state has offered through grants tutoring opportunities for our students. So they just might very well do that. We just don't know yet.
Second question is, what role does a school's reading specialist play in the instruction of students with IEPs? I think you kind of addressed that a bit. And is this different in elementary, middle, and high school?
I can't speak to high school or middle school, but again, it's, since I've been in this role, reading specialist, and when I was a reading specialist, I had students often that had IEPs. And so we would always serve the kids with what they need. So as long as that doesn't interfere with their required time from their IEP, then we're good. It just depends on what that scheduling looks like.
And we're interpreting that those people cannot provide IEP instruction.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
In the shift from level-based literacy to skill-based literacy, what tools are being utilized to measure student progress?
Could you say that one more time?
I think in the shift from level-based
Yes, ma'am.
literacy to skill-based literacy, what tools are being used to measure student progress, I guess, in addition to the
Sure,
vowels?
that's a great question. So we do have the 3 times a year now vowels. There's also progress monitoring that has come with vowels, which I think we've not really begun to utilize like we will be able to. We used to have quick checks with PALS where classroom teachers could utilize that to actually monitor what was going on and what the kids were learning. So they've recently put out the progress monitoring piece that matches up with vowels, and there has been an enormous amount of newness this year in literacy. And so we've had to kind of be very careful, very mindful in what we're doing, intentional in professional learning, intentional in what we're unfolding at, we've had a new core program, we've had new standards, we've had a new screener this year. So there's been a lot. And so that progress monitoring tool I think is going to be very helpful. I wish they would put it online for our teachers because it would be so much easier. For our reading specialists, they gave the dibbles in the fall. We're getting ready to give it again. We purchased M-Class a little bit later in the year because we were trying to get HMH up and running and purchasing everything that way because the list came out late for us to purchase. So they have three times, beginning, middle, and end of year dibbles, benchmarking. And then there's progress monitoring that's built into the M-Class program, just like Mrs. Boring referenced earlier. So teachers are also, we have HMH as our core program, and there are ample opportunities for assessment. And then, of course, there's informal assessments. Third through fifth, we give the MAP growth assessment. And so we do that in elementary. And so that's also a screener for our third, fourth, and fifth grade students.
Now, I know the STARS test in middle school, is that?
That's gone,
Is
right?
that gone now?
No, we're still using that?
Yeah, we
Okay.
still use that.
And that's for reading comprehension primarily?
It's a variety of skills. It's language, it's vocabulary, it's reading comprehension, different skills, but that's also administered 3 times a year. That's our universal screener that we use to kind of flag our at-risk students, and then we put in interventions in place to kind of, support students where their weaknesses are.
And what grades is that administered?
6 through, it can be up to 6 to 12, but we do 6 through 9th grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, of all these different tests, which ones get reports, like, is there a report sent home to all the parents of kids who took them?
Yeah.
All of them?
With their literacy screening.
There should be.
Yeah, any
Okay.
kid that's flagged as Virginia code, notification has to go to parents if they don't meet the benchmark.
Okay. But at this point, that doesn't trigger a reading plan unless they're in K2?
K3.
K3,
Mhm.
okay.
K3.
I'm getting there, okay.
It's okay, we are too.
And that's secondary. I mean, we don't have reading plans, but, we're not waiting for the state to give us reading plans to take action. We've been putting in interventions based on all NVA requirements, and we've been looking at a range of skills from foundational skills with decoding. We have Ignite Reading, and then from there, we're building up to fluency. We have Read Naturally Live we're implementing, as well as targeted differentiated skill practice with IXL reading. And then we have our teacher-directed close reading lessons and passages that teachers can use to support students who just, need that deeper comprehension focus.
So the first ones you mentioned, are those done by a reading specialist at the middle school and high school level?
No, because it's all in VA, so it's literally all in. Many people have been trained, other
So
teachers.
it's during all in VA time?
Yeah.
Got it,
Mhm.
okay. I was just
Yeah.
trying to picture how it was all.
Mhm.
Okay. The next question, any other questions so far? I think that's, what assessment tools does FCPS use to measure the effectiveness of Tier 1, 2, and 3 literacy interventions for students with disabilities? So how are we measuring the effectiveness of all of these?
We have progress reports. All of our programs have progress reports. Our screener has progress reports. So we look at the growth or lack thereof, and then we make adjustments to the frequency of the intervention. Maybe we change the intervention depending on, what those results tell us.
And presumably, the state-approved interventions are being monitored at a global level for effectiveness.
Yes, ma'am. And I think, I noticed you said special education, and I know that's the audience where we are tonight, but we do that for all of our students.
Right. Well, and that's, so the Tier 1 and 2 are general education,
Yes, ma'am.
and Tier 3 is
Right.
special education. But a student,
Not necessarily. We've got some
Well, I
students
heard
who
you-
aren't.
That are not identified, that are in Tier 2.
that are in Tier 3.
are in Tier 3, they receive a Tier 3 intervention. Okay. Great, that's good, that's good news. What specialized literacy programs are available, this is a Ms. Gum question, in addition to seeing stars, and I think you just answered that with the,
Amanda Osborne is one of our special education supervisors.
Glad to
She
meet
just come in, and she's kind of overseeing the majority of our reading piece. Amanda's also our dyslexia advisor in the community, and so I'm going to let her speak a little bit onto what we're using here.
great.
So we do, so we have Seeing Stars that we adopted within the Grade Bell. We typically begin around second grade and it goes to grade 6. And we have teachers that are trained in elementary school and in the middle schools. That is focusing on decoding, word recognition, and then applying it to text. Then Lindenwood Bell also has visualizing and verbalizing, which works on comprehension strategies. So once a student is able to have the decoding piece and the word recognition, and they're still not progressing within comprehension, then we would move into something like visualizing and verbalizing, or maybe that's where we begin from, depending on what their data shows. We started with assessing them 3 times a year for progress monitoring at the word level, at the decoding level, and then at the fluency level, just making sure that they can apply the skills to text. With the adoption of Amplify for our younger babies, I call them babies, sorry, for our younger students, what we do previously is we would be using whatever the tiered interventions that they would be receiving, because a lot of times they're not necessarily identified yet in K1. So they may have started off with a reading specialist, and then once they're identified, they can continue with the reading specialist as a Title I is that they, or with the Virginia Literacy Act, and even with previously PALS, they would be required to have 2.5 hours of additional reading instruction. And that could have been with the reading specialist or moving to a case manager. And then knowing with all of the initiatives from the Virginia Literacy Act, we talked about adopting the same intervention program of Amplify for our K1 students who might not have the phonemic awareness piece or the phonological awareness piece. So instead of stopping one intervention and starting a new intervention, just continuing that through. And then once they get to 2nd grade, if they need something more along the lines of seeing stars or visualizing and verbalizing, we can move them into that progression at the elementary school level. As you can tell, that's where most of my days are spent in elementary. And then in middle school, they can have access to visualizing and verbalizing and seeing stars. We also have Read Naturally, if that is something that they need to work on for fluency. That is something that I know that they're working on there for the students as well. With the adoption, or the expansion, I should say, of the Virginia Literacy Act moving to 8th grade next year, we've already started talking about, even though the state hasn't come out with approved programs, we've started looking at what is out there. I've been attending the Region 4 Dyslexia Advisors trainings and information sessions that they have. I was at one 2 weeks ago on specially designed instruction and what that can look like depending on where the student's area of deficit is. And so we talked a lot about the different cognitive disabilities and any student and any of the cognitive weaknesses, and then even weaknesses such as that might be attributed to students that have behavioral challenges and how we can address that too. So there's a lot of conversations at the state level for students with disabilities and how we can continue to support them even with the expansion of the VLA.
Great, thank you. According to the developer, what are the fidelity requirements for Lindenwood Bell Seeing Stars when used as a Tier 3 intervention?
I'll take this
Can
one
you speak
because
to it?
I did a lot of the research with Lindenwood Bell and some of their early onset. So the program itself was designed, whoops.
You were fine where it is.
Sorry. So the program itself was designed to be in their centers in a one-to-one setting with like 4 hours a day. So the fidelity of it was constructed from the very beginning. They wanted children in their centers. We certainly can't do that as a public school. We can't replicate that. But when we made our contract with the company, and I think we were one of the only divisions in the state that had it and has it at this point, we built upon what they were saying. So we did agreed upon assessments that they were okay with, that they felt like would give us good measures. They allowed us to have a person, so we had a contact person. That person didn't do the actual training of the program, but she did our professional development. They did observations and monitoring of our teachers to give them, problem solving or to give them tweaks of what needed to happen. And then when we were talking about pushing this out in a public school setting, we talked about we couldn't replicate the hours or the one-to-one, but how would we replicate it? So their advice to us as we move forward with this was we would have no more than 5 students with a trained teacher, with an observation once or twice a week based on how experienced the teacher was with it, and then it would be for 40 minutes every day. And so with that, that's where we have moved forward with our progress. We share that progress with Linda Mubel. They've used it to solicit it in other states with other school divisions. And so we took all of that from their advisory as a public school using their program because we knew we couldn't be in a center-based program. So that's where we were. It was exciting times. So.
What steps does FCPS take if a student with disabilities is not making sufficient progress with Tier 3 intervention, and that's...
That's an IEP team
That's an
discussion.
IEP team, so we have a couple questions here where
Sure.
that was, got highlighted for that. So just to make sure everyone understands that at the point a student isn't making progress who has an IEP, then that's time for the IEP team to convene. And if there's a parent who's concerned about that, they should be talking to their case manager about convening a meeting of the team. What happens in FCPS when a student of average cognitive ability enters high school and is still unable to read effectively? What interventions are currently being used at the high school level? And I think this is it's Virginia Literacy Act right now isn't ever going to apply to high schools, correct?
The law is just written right now.
Through 8th grade. So this is really a question of just what is the practice right now in Fauquier County?
So again, I think that's an IEP team decision. It's an RTI.
Well, no, this
It's
is, I think,
looking
not
at-
a student who's necessarily, well, I guess presumably they would have been identified as.
Amy, are you talking about like an overall from the core subjects? Because I know
Well,
like,
the question is,
like a tally
okay.
of the overall.
whether the question was intended to be broad or not, I'm going to limit it to reading intervention for tonight. So the question is, if a student's not making progress, it goes back to, I guess, the answer in the last question, which is if you have an IEP and you're not making progress, if a student can't read when they get to high school, presumably they will have been evaluated for a disability at some point along the road, hopefully. And if they get to high school and they haven't been, then that would obviously be a step that would.
And if they've been doing interventions and you're not at a point where you're seeing progress and you're having concerns, and that's why I said back to the IEP team, because at that point, someone from our office should be in on that meeting. We should be reviewing that data, reviewing the interventions. Where are we? Where are we still seeing gaps? What things do we need to do that we haven't done yet? So I'm going to say IEP team, special ed office, in collaboration with the data to figure out where we go next.
Great. What happens, sorry, that was that question. Does FCPS readily offer compensatory education? This, I'm going to just answer right now, is a IEP team decision.
Correct.
Compensatory education is always an IEP team
Yes.
decision. How many students with disabilities are currently using outside services paid for by FCPS for literacy instruction?
Yeah, I don't think I could be able to disclose that.
Okay. Are high school special education teachers trained to provide basic reading instruction, elementary level phonics and decoding to students with significant disabilities? Does the school consistently propose reading IEP goals for students who are not yet proficient readers?
I think that's a good question, but I think it's also, it's on an independent basis, but it depends on where that child is. You may have a child who has struggled to read and they are still in that place where we're ready, or we can still reach to them, right? Like the child is still open and willing to work on it. We may have other students that they've become so frustrated over the years that we can't reach them. They are at, I'm done. So it really depends student specific. Do we keep going? What do we look at? Other pieces would be at what point do we really look at their accommodations? What accommodations do they have? What assistive technology do they have? So I think it's very specific because it's going to depend. You're not going to make progress if you don't have the mindset of the child to move in it if they've become so frustrated. So I think you have to really look at it and figure out where we go. But we have the pieces and the tools. We need to have the buy-in from the student.
I guess the only piece of that.
Do you consider social workers in that as a counseling to the student?
Of course.
If they're frustrated,
Of
is
course,
that an
IEP,
option?
yeah, social workers are many times invited to IEP meetings for various reasons that the child may be displaying something at school where they need to talk about or they need counseling. There can be counseling in a child's IEP.
But I mean, if you're saying if a child is frustrated, is that immediately identified as, we seem to be running into a brick wall here?
That would
They
be a
seem
team.
very
Be a team,
cognitively
yeah.
frustrated.
It would be a
How-
team decision.
Would that would be, okay.
Yeah, because some child may accept that, right? And then other children are like, no, I don't want to talk about it. So
Absolutely.
it's team-based on where we would go with it.
I guess that comes, the question that remains there, because all of that makes sense, and I think that's why it's so important that we're resuming competence and really believing that children can learn to read at younger ages, because
Right.
once they get to high school, it is
Right.
much, much harder.
Yeah.
That said, if you have a student with a significant cognitive disability who's been making progress on phonics, but over time, are there special education teachers at the high school level who are trained to provide phonics-based
We're
instruction?
moving, yeah, we're moving in directions. I mean, the state is pushing all these things, and so as Amanda and I and the rest of us talk about it, where does this go? You know, this kind of all got slammed to us less than
Yeah,
a
no,
year
no,
ago.
no, I get it, and
And we're
I'm not-
trying to look at big picture, like where do we go? How does this funnel out? How do we make best use of everyone? So yes, probably over time, as we can figure this out and have children who are still didn't hit it when this happened and are still in that loophole, we're gonna figure those things out, and we are open to do so.
Because one of my concerns is that the alternative assessment has not yet, like, we have the new standards, but we don't yet have alternate standards that align with the newest literacy standards. That's correct, right?
Not at this time yet.
Yeah. So those students really are kind of left behind the Virginia Literacy Act at this point, if they're on the alternate assessment. And so I feel like this is a really important thing not to lose sight of. How are required reading plans implemented in the middle and high school level? And the answer we found
Yeah,
out
got
is
that answer.
they're not. What are the most significant challenges you face related to literacy education of students with disabilities?
It depends on who you're asking. Are you asking
Well,
the
I'm
director of
asking
instruction,
everyone.
SPED?
I'd love to hear, yeah, I'd love to hear, I mean, obviously, your answer's gonna be different than
Yeah.
what we see in gen ed. Ms. Boring, what would you say?
You can give teacher perspective.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, it's perfect.
So I think, especially as students are getting older, I think something different from middle school, when I was, elementary before, is that they don't want to leave class. They don't want to come and receive help from me, right? They want to be in the classroom. So while we still are providing that support, and I do think, as Ms. Gunn was saying, as we get more information and programming down the high school, we are doing that in middle school. We didn't have Linda Bell in middle school, right, when we first adopted that. It was in elementary. And as we saw the success and the need over time, we now are providing that for our students in middle school. So that's just to say for those listening or those here that as they are seeing the need for that and we are recognizing where that comes, I do think our county is moving in the right direction with that. But so I think for the older students, it just becomes they're more aware of disability, and then you lose the confidence, and then when they do go to take a test like the STAR reading assessment or HMH, they just click through it, right? And so you can look at the testing duration. So then we do look at the reports with the kids and come back and say, listen, you took 8 minutes on this test. There's no way you read it in the questions, right? We need we're looking for over 20, and then we'll have them say, would you give it another shot? And then they'll do that, and then they're 3 grade levels higher than when they took it the last time, because sometimes they just go into it with that defeat, right? So I think in middle school, at least, I can't speak for high school, but that's one of the biggest challenges I think that our teachers face, is just getting the buy-in and for them wanting to come, because it is so hard for them, right? And they see it not being so hard for their peers.
Well, and I think it's magnified. If you're looking at that as a middle school student, the struggles you're having, you can imagine the struggles you would have at a high school level with those students.
And it's just across the board, reading, right? Like if you have trouble in math, maybe in science, that might hit you, but reading is every single, from the time you get there in the morning, morning announcements, reading what's going on, what they're showing up there, to, the math problems, to science, to, directions in PE, if they're putting that up on a board for you to follow, So I think that as the kids get older, right, like us being very aware of the accommodations that are available to them, and then the teachers just being really open to trying those and exploring those with the kids. And I think our assistive technology team does a really great job of coming in, because we will have students that come in, and the technology is always changing, right? And our general education teachers are, the ones that I've worked with in the different buildings, are always really great, because they're constantly having to learn those accommodations, sometimes right alongside of us. So, but our assistive technology, if you email them, the team, and there are not very many of them, right, as most of our teams are, but they make time and they get into the classrooms and to help provide that. So I think the accommodations piece is also, just keeping up with that.
And reading is not one of these skills that is necessarily linear in how we see a lot of things because there's so many different cognitive processes that can go into reading just in general. So that's like one factor. Environment of the student is another factor. How much, exposure to literacy did they have prior to starting to school? How much exposure do they have when, they're just in their everyday contextual, conversations with people once they leave the school building? What is their language status? We did a lot of research last year, or training with Dr. Ortiz about our English language population and what the trends are in their reading. So I think when it comes to reading instruction, making sure that we're making data-informed decisions about the reasons truly behind why a student's not progressing, because sometimes it's not always that there is necessarily a suspected cognitive disability, but there might be some of these other things that might be at factors. And if we can, which I'm not, saying that the Virginia Literacy Act hasn't been hard, but it is giving us that insight to student reading in a much more graver detail. And I really do like the breakdown of the new vowels because it does show us the gaps that we need to hit before they become too wide. So I know that it's been hard for us, but I do like a lot of the information that it's giving us because it is helping us tailor that instruction for students.
Well, and speaking to the environmental factors, we're in a place now where we've been able to successfully implement vowels for the fall, as well as now we've implemented it successfully for the midterm of the year. And so one of the things that we have noted with those two implementations is that we've seen, I would use the word significant growth in our kindergarten population, because when we talk about those environmental factors of students that came in maybe with some literacy skills, without literacy skills, we didn't really have a baseline for that particular group of students. And what we've seen with the fidelity and how we're utilizing our core curriculum is there's been some significant growth made, not just in kindergarten. I would say kindergarten's probably been the most significant grade level. But our elementary schools have really seen some great growth happen in K-3 with the use of this screener, with the use of this core curriculum, and using it with fidelity. So I am optimistic of what that will do in the future as well.
Well, I can say of all the areas that the Seac has looked at, from the time I came on the Seac, and Amanda was here with me then, the changes that have happened in dyslexia and literacy in this county, it is completely night and day. So that's a lot of hard work has gone into that, and special education and general education, and it's a testament there are, how many administrators in this room who are just, really focused, laser beam focused on literacy.
Yeah, and if this last question is directed at me, I would say we have worked so very hard to be not a silo, but to be a collaboration with the Department of Instruction, starting with reading, and we'll just continue that. We have to have that collaboration. Our kids are across the span there, and so we'll just continue with that as we move forward with whatever BLE throws at us.
Well, thank you. It shows. I mean, I think it shows.
Can I?
Yeah, actually, I
Sorry.
think, no. I just want to let everyone know. I think we have about 7 more minutes if people have questions to keep us on track, because we have quite a few other things we have to do after that. So go right ahead.
Well, I just have one, and I think that it's wonderful that we have so many different tools at our advantage that we can use to look at assessing and seeing where deficits are, and looking at more specific areas to focus on, since that is very helpful. My question is more for maybe those children who get stuck in the cracks, who are in special ed services. They are they're getting bad test scores in literacy, but they're not bad readers. What safety net do we have right now to identify those children so that they don't end up in a remedial course, or finding out what is creating the testing issue?
Do you mean like a bad test taker?
So
Potentially,
like
it
a bad
depends.
test taker.
So I think
like
I'm going to
they
ask Ms.
understand,
Crane to
but-
make sure I understand correctly. Before a child goes into a remediation setting, parent has to give permission for that. Is that correct, or is that not correct?
You mean for the reading center with reading specialists? Is that what you're?
For anything, so say a child they're in one of the bands, a low, high-risk band, but we know the child can read, we just know that, they have a trouble taking a test. So the child with the state, if they're in that wristband, we're supposed to put them into some type of intervention, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have to have parent permission to put them into that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so if a child,
And you have to have parent notification,
We have to have parent notification, and
not permission.
a parent can decline services in the
That's
reading
very
center.
different.
So it's an opt-out.
Yeah.
But it's not told. They're not told they can opt out.
Ooh, that's a good point. Is there a policy that's tied to the
Not unless
process?
you go
Okay,
specifically.
okay, no, let's ask questions. Let's ask questions.
Okay, so there's supposed to be an opt-out, and is that indicated anywhere when the child's letter is sent home?
I will have to check that and send it back, but I mean, there is a letter that is to go home to say that a student is being seen in the reading center, and there have been parents that have declined that they don't want their child to be seen in the reading center.
So can I ask a question? So is that something that you have in policy, or is that something that, like,
I don't-
parent just has to make that decision and say, hey, I don't want my child to be a part of that, I want to do things differently, or?
I'd really have to follow up about that. I don't think there's a
Please do.
policy about that.
somebody write that down.
It'd be good for parents.
My other question is, shouldn't the teachers be identifying these students as opposed to the parents?
Well,
Since,
I don't know what you mean by the parents identifying it, but what I was
Well,
going to
you're saying
say,
that if the child is being put into a remedial class,
yes,
if
ma'am.
the parent doesn't believe that the child needs that class,
Mhm.
or I guess doesn't want the child in that class, they can opt out for that child.
Yes, ma'am.
But the child is not opted out by the school if the school would say, this doesn't seem right, this child
Like child find.
would.
So what would, it's almost reverse child find.
What if you have a child who's getting A's in reading class, but they failed their test?
That's the question.
That happens.
And they actually.
I mean, I'm just being really honest
And then
with
they're put
you.
in remedial classes.
Well, I can't
So, yeah, so what
speak
would
to
happen?
that.
What happens? How do you
Because
catch those?
that's more of a, I think,
an
an
IEP.
upper grade thing.
IEP could have
No, it's
accommodation
not an
test
upper grade
taking.
thing. Okay. What I would suggest, and I would always do this as a teacher, and so this would be my advice to families and teachers. Please have a conversation. Because if you know that a student is not performing well on tests, but they're getting really good grades in class, there's a disconnect there. So there has to be a conversation with the teacher and the parent, and maybe admin, and maybe a reading specialist. So many factors impact our students when they're taking tests, and it's so difficult to look at just data and not know the kid, because we don't know what's going on at that kid's house. We don't know if they're hungry when they came in or they didn't feel well. There were times that I was a classroom teacher and I had kids that were sick, and I didn't know it until after they took the SOL test, because they wanted to do well. They didn't want to miss it. They didn't, and so I think it's so important that conversations happen with families and with schools.
So there's nothing that you're saying, there's no policy where a teacher or special ed, any of the people who are in charge of educating our child are supposed to recognize that there's a serious deficit between.
Of course there is. The
No,
IEP
that's
will,
not
yeah.
what she's saying.
Well, not through
She's
the
saying-
literacy program, but the IEP should be doing these, like,
Because you
follow-ups,
have to
right?
be really, that, you didn't say IEP.
Right,
I
that's a
never
whole
said
lot-
IEP.
That's
Or
a whole
five-
lot.
I'm
Second-
talking about the
Okay.
testing.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
Kathy.
let's do one member at a time, because I
One
want to make sure
second.
we get answers to questions.
Aren't we obligated by VLA that if a child is in a wristband from taking the test, that we have to offer the parent the ability for the child to be in that intervention?
Yes, ma'am, and the parents are a part of the conversation with the student reading plan.
Yes.
Same with
Well, no, student reading plans are new. Now they're just
So they
K3,
have to create
K2
ones.
at this point, K3.
K3.
The same stands for
K3,
all of
but that's
tier
growing.
2. So a letter will go home that says,
Correct.
growth assessment, your students scored, and I received one as a parent, so I can speak to that. I know I received it from all my
That's
kids
exactly
saying,
right.
your student fell within this range, either for their SOL performance or on their math growth assessment. Would you like your student to participate in this particular assessment?
It doesn't say that. It says they will be going.
And if you do not want, I had to sign a paper for my son not to go.
So you have
I
to
had the option.
So
for my
in
child
yours, it
to
did say if you
fall
do,
in
Was that
tutoring or
this,
not.
was that this
What
year?
grades is the all-in tutoring?
Yeah,
this
you're talking
year,
about this
There's no
year.
clause on the paper that says that you can opt out, in other words.
you have to get a permission from the,
Third to eighth.
Was it this year?
Is that literacy specific?
was it this year
Math.
and last year, or just this
Both.
year?
This, all BLA came out this year.
Just
online.
this year. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying, like, everything pretty much
mean,
has
I've been-
changed in the
we've been-
past year in terms of
I've
how
been
things
struggling with this for
get
years.
done. Okay.
And I've been struggling, and I've heard it from other parents. I feel, or I would like to suggest that we start to look at training teachers also on, catching these children that are getting dropped in the cracks.
Can I just add something? Because I think
That's what
that,
else are.
what you just said would be something that you all could discuss about a recommendation in your plan. If that's something that you want to do.
And it
because-
may relate,
put no on it.
that kind of problem is probably more prevalent with certain disability categories.
It would be, yes.
And so that is probably a conversation that we could have, that this is something you need to be aware of. I know reading comprehension with kids with autism is,
ADHD as well can
Substantiate-
create some testing issues
Right,
depending.
and-
Can I add something? So I know personally speaking, because I have a son that's going to be going into high schools next year. He has an accommodation for state tests. That is under sections 504. And you can do that as long as the team and this, you have to have it on your plan, on IEP. But there are points where they ask you, does the student need, accommodations for
Right.
state testing? And there is clauses that will allow for it, depending on what it is. For
Well-
example, if they want the questions read to them and they can verbally.
and I don't think this is so much, I'm assuming accommodations are in place. I think this is just fundamentally, if you have a student where test scores and grades don't seem to align with each other, what's the process for that? And we should talk about that. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, it's one of the important roles of parents
Right.
to backstop some of that, and that's why they're such an important part of the IEP team. And I think helping parents be part of that, but also helping teachers be able to flag that. I mean, because like Ms. Crane is saying, at central office, that's a pretty hard thing to do with the entire, student body.
Yeah.
But there may, that's something, certainly something IEP teams should look at.
We do that. We
So-
do dig in, and we do have conversations with grade levels in our schools. Our literacy coaches do that. We talk a lot about the data. We look at, like Sean was just saying, we have multiple data points to be able to do that.
So do you know how many children are at risk of failure in your literacy? And then do you know how many are actually failing in their grades? Like, so the difference between testing scores of literacy and the teachers' grading scores of literacy? Do they correlate?
We had that from the previous year, because we usually look at their end of year.
We do look at.
And of course, that could be one of the things. That could be a problem with the test taking. It also could be a problem with the instruction. So you have to be
Very
really,
hard
the flip side is you have to be really careful if you're going to be asking parents, oh, hey, by the way, you can opt out of this. And if parents says to their kid, do you want to go to reading whatever? And they say no, and they opt them out of an intervention that they need. So I think it's a really complicated problem.
It's so important, though,
But
let's
make a note to add that, if you can put that in the minutes, that this is a conversation we need to have as part of our policy discussion for students with disabilities, because I think that makes sense to dig in a little bit deeper on that.
And thank you, Dr. Napolitano, or Mr. Napolitano. Thank you very much for
He did
that.
show up at dinner time.
Are there any other questions? This has been a really good conversation. I appreciate
Thank you.
everyone's time.
Very much.
Any other questions? Thank you all very much. You, of course, are always welcome to hang out for the business portion of our meeting.
Thank you.
But we certainly won't be offended if you feel that you would rather, your time can be spent better elsewhere.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right.
I keep moving the table on you.
No, you're fine.
Reports.
This is coming up.
Keep rolling
Seac
away.
Chair, that's me. Just a reminder that our next meeting will be a review of the annual report, annual plan, right? The annual plan, not the annual report. The annual plan by Ms. Gum. The plan is to get a draft of that out to everyone so that you can review it before the meeting. Also.
Snow
I-
days of help will be good.
Pardon me?
Snow days of help would be good.
We have, yeah.
I had no
please.
interruptions, I was able to, so we're good.
Excellent,
We're
excellent.
good.
I'd also like to send out the final 2024 annual plan, just so that people can compare, whatever, and I'm not sure I have the final version, so if you could
I
send
can
me
get you.
that. And then we'll also have an update on the inclusive practices plan that night. On February 22nd, the Youth Resource Fair, everyone on the committee has a copy of this. For those folks at home, it looks like this. If you're at home and you don't have information about the Youth Resource Fair, email seac@fcps.org and we will get it to you. It's important that everybody in this group understands, there used to be a standalone transition and disability fair. It's been at Fauquier High School and it's been at Kettle Run. Would you mind having it? It's Fauquier High School and Kettle Run High School in the past. This year, the Disability Fair is being wrapped into a broader Youth Resource Fair that was also held in the past, but they were two separate events. And so now we're going to have a big event, which is fantastic, because hopefully we can get a lot of parents there and have them find out about all these wonderful resources that are available to them. The one hitch in all of this is that it's really important that we get the word out to people who have gone to the Disability Fair in the past that this is the same thing and that it's at Liberty this year. So if you talk to anyone, talk to parents, I know that FCPS is pushing information out, but I just really want to make sure that we don't lose anyone in the process who thinks that there's something coming up at Fauquier High School. We will have a Seac table there. We will hand out brochures, which I think I have plenty, so we don't need to make copies. I may need more later in the year. We'll have a sign-up list for Seac distributions. We'll have the resource list, which I'll talk about in just a second. And for Disability Awareness Month, we'll be recruiting members for 2025-26. And you can, in case I'm not there when you're having this conversation ever with anyone who's interested in being a member of the Seac, just have them email me at the main Seac address, and I will be glad to talk to them. And then third, just a reminder that March is Disability Awareness Month in Fauquier County. And thanks to everyone who's been working so hard on getting that put together. That is all I have. Ms. Gum, you're up. Surprise.
Yeah. We are moving in lots of directions. We're moving towards inclusive practices. We had an all-day training with TTAC on the teacher workday the other day. Really going back to the bare basics. We have a lot of new teachers. We have a lot of teachers who never taught before COVID. So I call our pre-COVID teachers and our post-COVID teachers.
Is that the how to write an IEP?
And so we had that training, just going back to basics and reminding everyone what we need, what it looks like. We'll continue to work with TTAC as we move forward with IEP development, as well as inclusive practices, how that will work. Working on the annual plan. Moving right along. We got 3 months left.
All righty.
Counting down.
Can't even believe Thanks. Parent Resource Center.
Thanks
What are
for
you up to?
mentioning the fair. Hope to see everybody there. I'm going to cover everything your family needs, birth to adulthood. Ms. McAuliffe and I met today at Liberty High School with Ms. Bell to do our final walkthrough. And please, nobody mention anything to me about the weather next week.
Fair enough. There is a weather date.
But I've already
We
had,
don't want to do that.
some organizations are already, they have something already lined up for, 'cause we
Okay.
started months ago. They have other responsibilities, and so it's just, it won't be as good, it's never as good when you have a
Agreed.
snow day, rain day. So we're hoping next week.
All right. And then State Seac meeting the first week of March. That's really one of the news there. Old business. The proposed inclusion awards and recognition. Unfortunately, Megan is out tonight because she's coming down with the flu, she thinks. She has a fever and kids in her class have the flu. So I said, that's good enough for me to tell you, don't come sit next to me. So you have an update for us.
So, yeah, so conceptually, Dr. Warner is on board. He thinks it's a great idea. We have just been, like everyone else, our meetings have been, we were supposed to have a meeting Friday and then we were supposed to meet on Tuesday. And so hopefully next week we can actually run through the actual proposal, but I have already kind of put it out there, and so conceptually it's a go. He just wants to look at the details, look at the proposal in a little more detail, and so what I would say we're 95% good to go. So
And
it's just a matter of I did want, this is the other piece of that I want to bring up. We do have and we're going to kind of work through this because you included it in the proposal about what the recognition would actually look like. Just because we actually have an outline now of how people are recognized based on certain things. So for instance, like kids that come first and second in the state are recognized at school board meetings where other kids may just be recognized at their school. And so, it's actually all laid out now, so we need to look at the proposal and then kind
Line it
of
up.
figure out where is this gonna be like a school board thing, or is it gonna be a Seac thing, or are you all gonna go to the school and present it, or something? So we'll have to figure that piece out.
Okay.
But the actual idea itself, I think, is a go. It's just the logistics of
Okay.
it. so.
And I think I would just to throw this into the mix, since Megan's not here, because the SEAC itself doesn't really have a forum. I know people are at their schools, but the idea is that this is a district-wide thing.
Mhm.
I think I would make the case that the recognition is, because we're an entity of the school board, that's why the school board would be the logical place, not necessarily that it rises to whatever
Okay. 'Cause
system is already set up.
I think in the proposal there was options. That's why I was bringing it up.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's why we're not gonna get into details, because.
And even if you did it at a school, you could have Ms. Yeelan there to, put it on the website so that it's recognition of all that and things like that.
Right, and, I mean, part of it, though, is that from our perspective as a SEAC, our goal is to raise awareness about inclusion at the district level and with the school board. So doing something at a single school isn't necessarily, it's great for the person who's getting recognized, but doesn't necessarily, kind of meet all of the goals of the SEAC. I don't know what her proposal, because we were originally talking about doing that this year, and I don't know if that's.
I'll have to see.
even
I think we're
a
gonna run out of time,
Yeah, I
especially if
think
we're
so,
talking
too.
about school board meetings, because by the time
Well, and putting the whole thing together.
But by the
Right.
time we get, like, the information, by the time you all create something for us to send out, and then get that information back, and then you meet, and then figure, we're probably gonna be in May, to be honest with you.
And we want to have a lot of publicity around the first time, so.
Yeah,
that-
so,
that
my
makes sense.
recommendation would be to just start the school year with it,
Yeah, that sounds
as a fresh new thing that we can kind of roll with, and then, that'll give us plenty of time to get.
It'd kind of be cool if you did it, if you were gonna acknowledge it at a school board meeting.
In March.
In March,
Yeah.
right? Like, that
To
could just
ready
be
it.
tied into the
Agreed.
whole.
Yeah, it's a perfect
Because even
idea.
if you did it at a school, like where it was decided, you go to the school, Ms. Yellen could go, Dr. Warner could go, you could go, Ms. Gum could go, and you could have, the division,
Like we do
people
posters.
there,
Mhm.
Dr. Brill, Ms. Bourne, or, go and do that, and then have it in the newsletters, and then, on X, let's say Twitter, and the social media stuff, right? Because that's how they do it when, teachers at each school for the teacher of the year, so every teacher has a teacher that's named teacher of the year, and so that's, they are invited to the school board meeting at the end of the year, right, when the teacher for Buck here is announced, but each teacher is not, it's done at their school, it starts at their school first, right, so.
That's
Well, but you
kinda
have
how we
one
do
from
with
each
the
school, and then,
posters,
so there's
too.
not that extra step. in the-
Right, and then that way, if you were doing it differently, where you're recognizing a related service provider, and you're recognizing, a teacher and a para, then, you could go to their 3 schools, right, and then maybe recognize all of them at the, the March,
School board meeting when we do.
And I haven't seen the proposal.
So we do
for
the poster
tiers and,
contest
different
and all
things,
of
but,
that. Everybody should have gotten a copy of the proposal with.
And I just may not have read it.
Yeah,
I get
it came
like
out with the minutes,
lots of
either
things to
last
come,
meeting
so,
or
yeah.
the meeting before, so.
Yeah.
We'll have
We
more
are-
information by next time,
Yep.
and we'll have somebody here who's
So we are
willing
moving
to
ahead.
take the
For
lead.
most
Awesome, that's fantastic. You got all that for the minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Terrific. All right, updated disability awareness resources document. That's what I did during the snow days. So everyone should have a copy, and I do want approval from the whole Seac, just so that nobody comes back after me years from now and says, what was this thing? So what I did for this year, it's mostly the same. Things that have been updated have a double asterisk. I added the ABCs of inclusion, which is, I like it because it's written by the mother of a son who is deaf, but it has 26 different disabilities, and there are a couple in here that I didn't even know about. So that seemed to me to be kind of a nice resource for teachers or for students, just to learn a little bit more about a particular disability, even if they're not reading the entire storybook. It sounds like they're very short introductions to these different disabilities. Let's see, what were the other? I just want to flag the new ones. Tick and Twitch, which is about Tourette syndrome, and these are both for elementary school age.
That one, I feel like that is going to be a very important subject, because speaking of as a parent with a child with Tourette's syndrome, I remember in the regular ed classrooms, people would make fun of him and he couldn't help it. And actually it would ramp up when he would get stressed out. So they didn't understand, to the extent of their actions and his actions and what it was, and they were confused. So I think this would be
Hopefully
amazing.
hopefully it'll be good,
Yeah.
resources for parents if they want to share them with teachers or whatever. I'm not your inspiration. This is, I flagged this, sorry. For the videos, I went through anything that was online and checked to make sure it was still a live link. There were a couple that weren't, so I just deleted those. I'm Not Your Inspiration is a TED Talk. It's the longest resource I have in here, and that's part of why I flagged it for high school. But it really gets into the idea of recognizing a person with a disability as being amazing just because they live their everyday life with a disability. And I think it's a great conversation starter for maybe even groups of people who are, high school kids who are volunteering with folks with disabilities, just to really be careful, about what you admire. There are questions here that a lot of people don't even think about, so. And then Talk to Me, which is, I liked it because it's an 11-year-old girl who communicates using an eye gaze device. And just the idea of talking to the person and not to their caregiver or to the person who's with them. And she does it's also not a super computerized voice, because some of the older eye gaze, you know what I'm talking about. So I would encourage everybody here to take a look at those, especially those videos. Sadly, some of our federal resources have been removed from the Federal Department of Education website, so I have deleted those. National resources, I added the Association on Higher Education and Disability, just because I think that may be a helpful resource. For Virginia, I don't have a lot, and here's why. There is a link to all the disability resources and advocacy organizations in Virginia in one place. So rather than trying to list them all, that's the place to go, and hopefully that won't go anywhere. So if everyone is okay with this document, I would entertain a motion that we approve this for distribution to librarians and admins in Fauquier County in preparation for Disability Awareness Month.
I motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
So on page
Discussion,
7.
sorry. Oh, yeah, do we have a
It
typo?
refers to it as inspiration one. So I was
That's how they refer to it.
I know, I just
in-
was wondering if when we gave a description of it, if we're gonna share this out with, the idea was to share
Oh,
with
to
parents
maybe
and stuff.
not use
Maybe not
that,
use the.
So we should remove that.
Or maybe, hold on,
Which one?
where is it?
It's
I'm
in
not-
quotes.
I mean, I know it's in quotes, and I know that it's not our description, but it's
Right.
just, that we're not sharing out something that's,
Well-
I just know that.
Page 7?
Yeah, and again, this is why I put it
No,
in
no,
high
and,
school.
you know, if-
In which
Lieutenant
able
Fontano
people
was from-
objectify, I tried to explain it,
Riverdale.
but yeah, since,
I would take it out.
take the word out.
Neurodivergent, maybe, is it?
Or, well, no, the term she uses in here is that, at the very least, I could doctor the word so the word won't appear on a search. What would you say? I mean, I feel like there's a pretty detailed explanation of what she's talking about.
Yeah, I think I understand what Amanda's saying. 'Cause,
Yep.
I think it's
Okay.
gonna raise
Okay,
some
is it
concern,
TED
even though
Talking
it's
with-
not like the,
Like, we
It
know
doesn't
that
Yep,
it's
mean
not
what
the-
you're-
explains
Yeah.
the issue.
yeah, I would just maybe,
I'll just do that.
Write a
Explains the
definition
issue
for
with
what that is.
abled people objectifying people with
Yes.
disabilities
For inspiration.
yeah.
for inspiration. Yep, okay, so I've
Perfect.
deleted idea through in which.
But thank you for compiling
And-
all that. That's a lot. Like, that's
Yeah, it
it's a
is.
good
Yeah.
resource.
Do we ever share these with the public libraries in the community?
No, but we definitely can.
I just thought
And
that might be a
actually,
good idea.
probably, well, we can also do some publicity around it as well. It's also on the Seac, it'll be on the Seac website. It needs to go on, I'll get you.
If you share it with
updated copy.
Chrissy Yonke, she may be willing to send it out to the school ambassadors.
Perfect.
And we could always put it on, in March, we could list it on our Facebook pages.
That'd be great.
I will send the corrected version out. Thank you for flagging that.
Yeah, that's what they're talking about.
I'll send a corrected version out
Yeah.
to this group, everybody on our
know what it is,
list
though, like it's-
with the minutes. But if everybody in FCPS could get it out to whoever it needs to go to, that would be great. Also, I'm going to have a few copies of this at the fair. And then I'll have a list there, people can just sign up and I'll send them emailed copies because that's probably easier. Since these are all links, it really doesn't do you a whole lot of good to not have the links. Okay, any other questions about that? All right. Also, during the year, if you come across any good resources, please let me know. Or if you ever get a resource that's on this list and it's not what I say it is, because I have not personally read all of these. I've reviewed them, I've looked at summaries, I've read most of them, I own a lot of them. When I wasn't sure, I bought it, but let me know. What's left? Update on Disability Awareness Month. Anybody, is there
I know
anything
the,
new since?
all of the poster contest all this information was shared.
Great.
I know that it was shared out with school ambassadors. I marched for Auburn, so I mean, I know that we definitely was on the distribution list. Everybody got it. And Ms. Gum, I know, also emailed APs and like department chairs to share with special education staff. So I know she's shared that with her lists. So now I think we just have to, I haven't.
The art teachers have all gotten it?
So, yes, I mean, they all should have received that. We have had a lot of snow days,
Yeah.
right? So if art teachers were going to incorporate that in some of their lesson, I mean, I don't know how that, is rolling in the elementary
What's the
schools,
due date?
But it's the 18th.
Yeah, she probably knows more than I do.
So.
Does it make sense to push it a little bit since we've had so many snow days?
I don't mind, reaching out to Chrissy and asking her.
Seeing if we
I know
can-
that she's got the deadline, right, of like getting
Yeah.
them, so then there's enough time to
I'm just
go
wondering if
through
we
them
could run
and look
through
at them.
one more weekend.
But I can definitely send her an
That
email
might be
and
possible.
ask her about
What-
that.
What is the name of that again?
The poster contest.
Oh, just the
Disability.
The
poster.
Disability Awareness Month poster contest.
But that's the, I mean, all the other dates you have on there, I think.
Thank you.
Who wants to go to the Youth Resource Fair with me?
I'll be there with Auburn, so.
Okay. I
can go.
I'm already there.
Okay. All right.
Can't commit because I have to be.
No, that's fine.
Non-purpose,
As long as we know that two of us will be there, if anyone else wants to join us for any part of it, just show up.
If an emergency, then I'll try to drag my husband in my.
Well, yeah, no, please don't. And please try to take advantage of the fair as well, like.
This
try
is
to-
down the street from my house, so this is gonna be amazing.
There you go.
That's not
Yeah,
too far.
definitely. If you want to pop in for a little bit, it's not heavy lifting. If there are two of us there, we'll be fine. Okay, in March is Disability Awareness Month. The March meeting, we already talked about. March 21st, Crazy Sock Day, World Autism Day on April 2nd. And then we have 2 more meetings, and those will be work sessions to develop our annual report. Mr. Napolitano, I sent you an email just today. I just want to make sure you got it with the questions about timing for some
I'll write
policy
back.
development. Okay, great.
I think you
Oh.
have some time.
New business. Policy discussion, we will hold off until we get, unless anybody has anything pressing, we'll hold off until we get to our meeting in April. And then with that, just the member roundtable. What's going on?
Not so much going on, but I did want to just raise to the committee just as just an open discussion as we start moving toward the annual plan and looking at next year. So I've been on Seac, I think this is my 10th or 11th year, because my daughter was in 2nd grade. And so over the years, right, we've kind of taken different approaches and done that, done a little differently. And I think that just as a consideration, I know for Seac, we have to meet, I think it's 4 times a year. And while I think it's great that we come together every month, that if we could maybe go back to like every other month, or maybe even like every other month and then take December, January, February off because we have all the weather. I do think when we started the presentations, we did have greater attendance when we were meeting less. And I think that's capitalizing more on the issues that are really, the systemic things or things that we think that will bring our community out, because we have great presentations, right? We have great people coming out, and the one like the paraprofessional was great. But I don't know, and I don't know like what the online audience looks like, if like we're getting a lot of viewers with that. But so just something just to consider, right, as we're thinking about it, and also for attracting more people to come to the committee. Sometimes it's hard for parents to come. Like there's 2 or 3 parents that I know would be really great, but they're like, I can't do a monthly commitment, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to be here, I think after the second one, right, then like, there's were requirements for that. And I know you're not like a huge stickler on it, but if we were following like the guidelines.
Yeah, we want members to come to the meetings.
So just something to consider. And I also think that with that, and I know we had talked about it with our previous director, but Ms. Gomez, new director, if we offered like an hour, like PD credit for like teachers. So like if we had the assistant, Dr. Walker. I know I was getting the first name, and I was trying to be respectful with her with the correct name, but last name. Like teachers to have come and heard that, like that could have been good information for them. So that I could submit, right, like to Ms. Gum, like I was here. Because we have the PD week, that we're required to do, and I think sometimes, especially for special education teachers, what a good idea. A lot of the training we sometimes go to isn't always applicable to really build our toolbox, right? I think we're getting better at that. Like that was great. We had that on the 7th. Meaning like sometimes we're really filling time to get our hours by going like Canva or different things, right? And something like this could be great, and like department chairs or people in our schools, right? We could share that information out. So this idea, I want to toss that out there, and then maybe just the committee just considering scaling back the meetings a little bit, and then hope of like being like, hey, it's a Seac meeting, right? Like we really want people to come out for that.
Can I propose a compromise?
Hold on,
I think
this is roundtable time.
Yeah.
So I'm making notes, but we can add these things to the
Because
agenda.
Dr. Warner did forums, right?
So
We
this
had
is
good
not,
attendance.
I'm definitely going to
Anyway,
add
so that's
this.
all I wanted to say.
Add this to the agenda. Thank you.
And our reading specialists, they left before I got to say kudos to them, because they really are great. They're serving all of the county, and I will say from my focus, obviously, the special education piece of that, and this, even at the beginning of the year, I had a lot of conversation with Ms. Bodie, her coming in, us looking at different data for, is it Linda Bell, is it this, different things, and she always made herself accessible, like usually within a couple days, right? So I think they really have a lot of information they're trying to work through with Ms. Maureen, Ms. Gum, everybody together, but they're, I feel like, I appreciate all their support they're giving us.
Thanks.
I don't have.
What you got?
I don't have anything to.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything.
I have nothing to talk about.
So I would like to propose some
Okay.
sort of compromise if we
Okay.
do consider.
We can talk about that, but we're not going to do policy discussion right now.
No. I'm just saying, if we do talk about the scheduling of like less meetings, is there a way that we can reach our constituents continuously? I mean, I'm a little concerned that if we do the meetings less, then that's less talk.
What do
And
you
if
have in
there's-
mind?
Well, I mean, we have the Seac website, right? And we have Facebook and we have X and all of those things. So I don't know who handles the technology portion of that, but maybe we could like just throw something like, don't forget about us, or like some sort of
Oh, it sounds-
advertisement for who's gonna be coming to the next meeting, when it is, you know?
I hear a
Reminders.
volunteer. Does anybody hear a volunteer? I hear a volunteer. That sounds awesome.
I just don't want people to stop.
Yeah, no,
Right.
and the answer to
I get
that
worried about
is that there used to be a committee member, I think who was probably Amanda, who was responsible for keeping all that stuff
Yeah,
up
we
on
did share
social
stuff
media.
on like the social media, like if we knew there was a PT thing, you know, that
Yeah,
there was,
I
like,
haven't
oftentimes it was
been-
just resharing the PT
Yep.
page, right?
I think
when they
that's
did that,
great.
but,
I think that's an excellent idea.
I think also our
Just to keep
PRC
it-
is also very active now too with sharing information
keep it
out,
fresh.
so.
Are you interested in doing?
I
being in charge of
could,
that?
I could. I was going.
Excellent, excellent. We will talk.
All right.
I gotta figure out who's got that login information for this, because those things were created a million years ago.
Can I
Great,
share
did you-
something with
Yeah,
Roundtable,
please,
just so that
yeah.
everyone knows? So last Monday night, was school board meeting, there was a proposal for the budget, so in case anyone's interested in looking at that, that might be a
Great. Would
document
you like
you'd
to
like
share
to see.
any highlights?
I can.
That'd be great.
So proposed budget is still proposal. At this point in time, there's a proposal of 4% increase for all staff. If we're talking about sped only, there's a proposal for the program-centered teachers to incentivize those that are here to stay and maybe bring others over here. They will get a $7,500 stipend for the year.
Is that every year or just for this year?
For right now, it's just
So
for this year.
current and
Well, no, it won't be
25,
for this
26
school
school
year, it'll
year.
be for next
for
year.
the budget
Yes.
year.
When you sign your
Yes.
contract for
Yes.
That's what I'm.
25,
sorry.
26.
Yep.
And then there was an additional 80.
Is it, are they required to stay for that year, for the entire year to get it?
I think there is gonna be
It'd
some
be-
sort of,
Mhm.
yeah,
Feedback,
some
okay.
small print in there.
Some of that was really because we could not recruit teachers last year for those specialized programs. And our 6 IAs that stepped up as lead IAs have done a phenomenal job. But to try to recruit and incentivize, it's a hard job, any of those programs.
Well,
A hard
especially when
job.
you're competing
Yep.
against our neighboring counties.
And I think other counties in Region 4 are doing the same
Yeah.
thing because
So we
it's so
wanna stay
hard
in
to,
one.
so we trying to
That's wonderful.
be competitive.
And then the last piece was proposed that special education office would get an $80,000 out of the local budget.
So that you can hire an assistant, so you don't have to do 3 positions.
Oh, sorry, an 80,000.
An additional
An additional
$80,000.
$80,000 out of
Okay.
local budget for special education for needs that are arising.
We do have a lot of kids coming into the district too, right? So, I mean, that makes sense.
Can I bring, I forgot something on the round table.
Yes.
May I bring something?
You may.
Sorry. I was looking, I didn't look today, but I haven't seen the BCBA or the behavioralist come up on the website for hiring
I
yet,
think it's there.
They're posted, there's 2 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
under BCBA
No, they're under behavior specialist.
and behavioral specialist.
They're called behavior specialists.
Yeah,
I
that-
looked at that,
Yeah,
okay.
they're there.
When did they come up?
They've been up for a couple of weeks, I'm getting ready to start interviews.
I'm not getting them on my,
Okay.
I'll have to look again, thank
Yeah.
you.
Please do, yeah,
Sure.
please do, and let them know.
Yeah,
if
we're
you
getting ready to
can't
start the
find it.
hiring process, so.
Well, then somebody's getting them, good.
I'm getting
Glad
them.
to hear that.
People have applied, so.
Yeah,
they
people
will
have
be.
applied, so someone's getting them,
Okay.
yes.
In the past, Seac has sent letters in support of the budget and specific provisions. So what's the time frame right now?
been
If you actually,
proposed.
if you go to the budget presentation, actually, I don't know what's on my head, and I don't want to misquote it, but if you go to the budget presentation on the school board meeting agenda, Mr. Shrester, our Assistant Superintendent of Finance, actually breaks down the time frame.
Okay.
So,
If we were to do a letter.
review is at this meeting, Board of Supervisors is at this meeting.
24th, I think.
Okay.
And then,
Big
and then
meeting
so on.
here,
So
too.
So I don't think our school board final approval is until April.
April.
Okay, so if we were to do a letter at our next meeting, we'd be in time for the process.
Yes, that would be
Okay.
wonderful.
Because they're on the 24th of February.
That will be on our agenda for our next meeting.
Letter. And I did put a listing up, and they're listed as behavior analysts, then there are 2 of them.
Behavioral analysts.
Then there are
Okay.
2, Ms. Thomas, correct.
I'm gonna look on mine again.
So I would appreciate any input from you all about what would be the most helpful
Sure.
language
Yeah,
submit.
absolutely.
And I think it was
I just
helpful
thought that
last
was
time.
important to
Last
share.
time, the last time we did it, it was for, when we were trying to get money for social workers. And I got emails back from members of the board, like, immediately, so at least they're reading their email.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to share that when I was talking, and
Thank
I
you.
forgot,
And
but
then
I
the
thought it
other
was
piece is
important.
just,
This is awesome.
just to follow up, I know Ms. Gum talked about the training for staff on February 7th. We also have a follow-up training with all of our assistant principals from TTAC. Our meeting got canceled on Thursday.
If it would
'cause we
stop
weren't here.
snowing.
Oh, I'm sorry, what, yesterday? The meeting got
Yesterday.
canceled from yesterday. So we're trying to reschedule that, but there was everything that we shared with the teachers was then going to be followed up with the assistant principals. So we have a lot of what I like to call circle back and around, so that everyone's on the same page as teachers hear it, administrators hear it.
Critical. Yes, excellent. If there are any resources, because I know, I assume T-TAC has a lot of this stuff off the shelf. If there are any resources that we can share out to parents, just, helping them kind of, I think it's really important that we help educate parents about their role on the IEP teams and that they understand all of the same things. It just kills me when a parent is like, oh, I was told this by the school and I'm so upset and I don't know what to do. It's like, you're a member of the IEP team, go to your IEP team and do what you're supposed to be doing. So anything that
I
we
mean,
can
Ms.
share
Gum would
out.
know in more detail, but the TTAC webpage is a wealth of.
And PT has a lot of good, I mean, there's a lot of good resources out there, and I know the Parent Resources Center is doing stuff. Unfortunately, the parents who go to the Parent Resources Center generally are the ones who know that they need to go to the IEP meetings. So just getting that information out there to parents that, this is, whether you like it or
It's
not,
tough
this is
though,
part of your
like-
job. It is,
Because
but I
parents need
think.
to understand, like, they're the one person or two people at the table, and then you've got a billion people.
Oh,
there, so
I'm not
it's
getting into that. All I'm
intimidating,
saying is that when we're educating IEP team members, it's important that we make sure that the parents, as members of the IEP team, also get those
We
resources.
need a parent liaison for the county. Oh, great, perfect.
He's our parent. He's our parent.
And I
resource
invited
center
him
guy.
to,
But,
some meetings.
so what we need.
I am
so
utilizing it.
As much as we can help parents understand that, that's the place to go, pointing them in the right direction, that's a big part of it. So, yeah, to that end, social media, I think, does,
It's a big deal.
will make a difference.
I wonder, is the Seac a place where we could discuss coming up with a, phone tree type deal for parents in order to know who to contact for certain issues? Because that's been
There's-
something I've found to be an issue in general as a parent, not knowing
Where to go.
who
Okay.
I should go to depending
I
on
think our
what.
role would be to direct them to the Parent Resource Center.
But it
right? Like,
depends
or
on
to
what's
their
going
school.
on.
Right,
Well-
but that, like.
But I'm talking about
So-
IEPs. I mean, I'm
So-
talking about in.
So our role is to advise the school board and the staff on policy or
I would like the
procedure
school to
or
provide
procedures.
something with-
So that would be the recommendation, and spelling out some detail about what that could look like would be, that would definitely be in the list. So put that in the minutes.
Okay.
That we need to talk about,
Like a.
what
phone
type of,
tree.
well,
Or, I know.
what type of resources, are there any resources we would want to recommend that the school division provide to parents? That would be the thing. I think informally, we can also reach out to the Parent Resource Center if we have suggestions, as people who are involved in these issues. Okay. Is there any other, I don't dare ask. Anybody got anything else? All right. If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes, motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. We adjourn at exactly 7:30.
Good.